France is in shock. Since the 19th century, the nation has sent out public school teachers to the four corners of the land with a mission to embody the values of the Republic, to behead a social studies teacher over Charlie Hebdo cartoons of the Prophet in the carefully controlled context of a civics class on secularism and free speech. Well, it defies reason. We'll ask about the 18-year-old Chechen refugee who was gunned down after carrying out the murder last Friday near the gates of the school in the Paris suburbs. We'll ask about the disgruntled father of a 13-year-old who publicly called for the victim's sacking over social media, the radical thinker who's accused of fanning the flames, and the reaction of political leaders who, 5 years after the massacre at Charlie Hebdo, still have more to do to make the fight against radicalism inclusive and effective. What to do when hate speech is too often unfiltered and critical thinking too often under assault. Today in the France 24 debate, are we facing a new age of intolerance? Joining us, he's a former high school teacher in the working class suburbs of Paris. Sociologist Fabien Truong joins us from London, teacher at the University of Paris 8, the author of Radicalized Loyalties, Becoming Muslim in the West. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Here in the French capital with Guillaume Denoy de Saint-Marc, founder and president of the Association of the Victims of Terrorism. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
And we're pleased to welcome attorney Philippe Cohen, founder of Respect Zone and the author of, or co-author, the author, of Internet Against Internet Hate. Tell us what Respect Zone is.
Respect Zone, it's a French NGO which is now present in New York, in Brussels, in Switzerland, and in England. And it's just started as what should we do to try to overcome cyber hate, especially when we are going to talk to the bystanders. What kind of tools or ammunition can we provide to youngsters not to close down the eyes when they see something wrong, and especially in the same vein as what happened last week?
Yeah, in virtual space as well as in the real one. We'll bring back that point. We also want to welcome back Samuel Paty, the head of the Justice and Liberties for All Committee. Thank you for joining us from Paris.
Thank you for having me.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter. The hashtag is F24debate. There were rallies across France Sunday, including at Paris's Place de la République, where teachers showed up in force to express their solidarity and their shock over the murder of Samuel Paty.
On est là pour défendre la République, les valeurs de la République, liberté, égalité, fraternité et laïcité. Voilà, on sent que la patrie est en danger, que toutes ces valeurs-là sont remises en cause. Il y a trop d'inactivité de la part du gouvernement. Il faut faire quelque chose.
J'ai fui mon pays pour fuir la dictature et la violation des droits de l'homme. Et je suis ici aujourd'hui pour soutenir le corps enseignant, pour soutenir les valeurs de ce pays, parce que, bien entendu, j'estime que l'acte qui a été posé, c'est un acte pour moi d'une gravité extrême, et que tout citoyen, en tout cas j'ai la double nationalité, et tout citoyen doit se lever pour faire corps à ce qui nous permet de vivre ensemble dans ce pays qui m'a accueilli.
Fabien Truong, lots of shows of solidarity with teachers. I've been on the phone with a few this Monday. The shock is palpable. Your former colleagues, have you spoken to any of them?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's in shock because obviously, it's shocking. I mean, a teacher should not be killed. So, yeah, I think at the moment the time is, consideration, shock, and bewilderment.
The French public school teacher, be it at the primary school level, middle school, or high school, he's got a different sort of aura and significance, you might say, than in other countries.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the jobs of high school teacher and history teacher is to bring some critical thoughts. And I think that was the work that was done by Samuel Paty, as far as I understand it. And so that this has got this particular place. But I would really like to stress that we can see that in D7, most of the problem doesn't really come from the classroom in itself, but from the echo chamber of the social media. And I think that's really important to stress, because it doesn't seem that Samuel Paty suffered from any problem in his classroom as a teacher. It's mostly what happened on the internet. And I think we should differentiate the classroom and internet, because when you teach, and the teaching relationship is not on social media. It's within the classroom, and it's a long distance run. It's a long relationship, and that's what that kind of trust and long relationship that you need to develop when you try to teach critical thought. And in many ways, there's some shortcut and bypass with social media, and that's one of the biggest problem in this case. I would have thought.
At the outset, though, Philippe Cohen, there is a problem in the classroom. He teaches a class on free speech, tells Muslim pupils if they want to leave at that point, they can. The father of a 13-year-old complains, tries to have him sacked. He has to counter-sue for defamation. It was getting tense, and then it gets on social media.
Yeah, because this is where the new debate is occurring. And I just would like to add to what was just said, is the fact that with COVID, it's not exactly right to say that the class is in the class and the social media is in social media. There is an intermix and an overlap of forums in a way. And social media is going to become also part of the reality of the classroom as well. And we have to
even after COVID?
it. Even after COVID, because there is it's like at work. I mean, we are going to all be being able to work both from home and also from your computer, and this mix is going to be much more fluid. And this does call for how do we educate not only our kids but also the parents and the teachers on how to live in a better, peaceful, pacified mode with screens. And this is exactly what our NGOs are trying to develop. It's how to make it a civilized forum, what we call a respect zone. And for that, this is exactly what was just said by my predecessor. It's how do we teach the critical thoughts? How do we get into counter-speech methods? And how do we try to incentivize bystanders not to remain passive, which is the start of citizenship.
Yeah, an argument takes place between the parent of a student and a teacher, and it snowballs and ends in this horrific act.
It's horrible. It's horrible, and it's a shock for all of us, all the victims. But also in our team, we have 2 teachers that are dedicated, working with the victims of terrorism to bring the testimonies of the victims and to open the minds of the in lycée and college, and really having critical thinking, thinking about what is it to be a victim, how do we get out from a victimized position, how can we decide what we do of our own life, even if we have been wounded, and all these different ways of thinking, getting out of hate, getting out of vengeance. What is justice? What is a society? All these different aspects. We try to teach them to all these kids because we hope that this will preserve them than to be hooked by jihadists or other extremists. Unfortunately, it didn't work because of that small girl who maybe lied to his father, and this father was radicalized. We can understand that by what we know from the file at this point, and went on the media, had other friends, and all this went on very, very hardly towards a community who was then complaining, and unfortunately, and we don't know how, a man decided to kill that teacher. And this killing a teacher is one of the most horrific things for a society.
Yeah, Yasser Louati, how do you explain this chain of events?
What's clearly on trial, is the how social media have taken over our social life and how an event in a classroom in a remote location on the outskirts of Paris leads to a frenzy on social media, and which snowballs, as you mentioned it, into the barbaric beheading of a teacher. Now, this should actually worry us, and as citizens, as parents, and as people who now try to figure out where is our country headed. The other trial, of course, is the failure of the intelligence community, because the assassin got reported multiple times, including by most of the people who reported him were Muslims. And what we are seeing today is that there is again a debate on freedom of speech and laicity. And unfortunately, this is taking place with the Muslim communities in the background. And we tend to teach those two fundamental values of our constitution in a way that when we speak about them, it's to turn them against Muslims, when in fact they are not. Laicity is one of the most sacred foundations of our republic. It actually protects religious minorities and people who have no religion, and even the state from religious interference. And the teaching of laicity, unfortunately, might be lacking an approach to be more inclusive and away from the public debate that have turned laicity into a tool that we pull out of the box to start targeting Muslims, whether as the enemy within or people who do not respect other people's right to believe or not to believe. And honestly, I don't see where this is going in the short term, because it went from, again, an isolated event, and that poor man's name was dragged into the mud for, I think, a week or so. And all of a sudden, he's living in fear because his name has been put in the public sphere, and people not thinking twice about the consequences of seeing the barrier between what's happening in real life and what's happening in social media. And as again, it snowballed with the disastrous consequences. And I'm not even sure that we are capable of grasping the consequences of what just happened. I mean, it went from something, at best or at worst, I can say that, misunderstanding, and it ends in the brutal killing of an innocent. So now we ought to ask ourselves, how much more of our social lives are we going to give to social media, and how is citizenry going to be educated on what holds us together in a safe space called the Republic, with freedom of speech, freedom of to believe or not to believe, and laicity as something that nobody should be able to challenge.
Yeah, laicité, that French term for secularism that's so particular here. In remarks earlier, the Interior Minister accused the father of the middle school pupil in Samuel Paty's class, as well as a known radical Islamist militant, of evidently, quote, launching a fatwa against the victim. That radical thinker, the Moroccan-born Abdelhakim Sefrioui, has been involved in past controversies, but always stayed within the law. Selena Sykes has more.
He is at the centre of an investigation into Friday's attack. Abdelhakim Sefrioui, a prominent radical Islamist, has long been flagged as a threat to national security and monitored by anti-terrorism authorities, though he has never been convicted. On the 8th of October, the 61-year-old Franco-Moroccan accompanied the father of a student to a meeting with the headmaster at the school where Samuel Paty taught. The father was one of a number of parents who had filed a complaint against the teacher after he showed pupils cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad during a class on freedom of expression. Outrage grew as Sefrioui fueled a virtual mob on social media, posting a video in which he appeared alongside the student's father, calling for Paty to be dismissed. According to France's Interior Minister, the two men had launched a fatwa, an Islamic religious ruling against the teacher.
Vous savez, ce qui est très marquant dans cette histoire, c'est qu'en fait, on voit bien que comment l'islam politique se joint à l'islam radical pour finalement mener au terrorisme.
A few days before the attack, intelligence services noticed that Sefrioui had got involved in the controversy. The note said that there had been an incident linked to the teaching of secular principles at the school in a suburb northwest of Paris, but concluded that dialogue between management and families had calmed tensions. Authorities were not concerned.
Il n'était pas porteur de menaces directes. Vous vous doutez bien que si ça avait été le cas, les services de renseignement auraient judiciarisé son cas et l'auraient immédiatement interpellé.
Not directly inciting violence is a strategy for Islamists to skirt around the law, according to this imam.
Ils connaissent les lois, ils connaissent le système. Et c'est pour cela qu'ils ne dépassent pas les lignes rouges. Mais ce n'est pas eux qui dépassent la ligne rouge, c'est les autres. C'est des jeunes, c'est des personnes naïves, ignorants.
For now, Sefraoui remains in custody, while investigators try to determine the role he might have played in the attack.
Again, it's early days, Fabien Truong. I know that when you were researching your book a couple of years back on radicalization in the suburbs, it's where does the fuel come from? Does it come from those who perpetrate the attacks? Does it come from radical thinkers who egg them on? Or does it come just simply from social media?
Well, it's a multi-layered issues, obviously, so it's not simple. But I think today the key is really social media, because there is a massive difference. And again, I want to come back to the idea of the classroom and the social media, because when you're teaching critical thinking, basically you teach to kids to make an argument, to make a point. You learn as well to change your mind. You have to learn to not to know something and coming on a
We seem to have lost the connection there with London. We'll try to reconnect as quickly as possible with Fabien Truong. I'm being told we're going to have to take a break. We'll be right back. There's much more to come. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and France is in shock. We're asking if we're facing kind of a new age of intolerance, what with the beheading by a radicalized 18-year-old Chechen refugee last Friday in the suburbs of Paris of a middle school teacher, one who had been teaching a class on free speech, in which he showed the caricatures of cartoons of the Prophet. With us to talk about it, sociologist Fabien Truong, who teaches at Paris 8 University, who joins us from London, the author of Radicalized Loyalties, Becoming Muslim in the West. Guillaume Denoy de Saint-Marc, founder and president of the French Association for the Victims of Terrorism, is with us as well. Philippe Cohen, founder of Respect Zone, a advocacy group that calls for prevention of hate speech on social media, and your latest book, Internet Against Intern Hate, which is a plea for respect online. And Yasser Louati, head of the Justice and Liberties for All Committee. Thanks to all of you for being back with us. There's been lots of political reactions, and we're going to see more in the days to come. At that rally on Sunday, there was the leader of the French far left, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who on Twitter reiterated his target, which is the Chechen community, Guillaume de Saint-Marc. He's saying that faced with Islamist terrorism, we must answer in a very precise way. There's clearly a problem with the Chechen community in France. Chechens who engage in political Islamism on social networks must be found and expelled. Your reaction to that?
I don't know why it's only the Chechens. The extreme. You have many extremists and many. The solution is not pointing one type of community. It's something that has been. We have to fight on three aspects. First, security, and unfortunately, it's not a way that will prevent from all attacks. And we could see what happened. The other point is justice. And it's very important that we never forget a terrorist attack, and all the persons who participate to a terrorist attack are going to be brought to justice, even if it's 50 years after. and that's what we're going on. In our association, we are in 80 cases of terrorist attacks coming from the 80s to now. So we never forget. And the other part is education, because anybody can become an extremist. Anybody can become a terrorist. As soon as you have you want to impose your point of view by violence, then you become a terrorist. So any cause can bring to that. And why the Chechen zone? I don't know. Why the Chechen? I don't know why. Only them. It's any extremist, any person who thinks that he had the truth and he doesn't want to share his point of view with others and to listen to the others and try to find a middle way. All these persons are extremists.
And we've also had measures announced like the plans to deport radicalized people of foreign nationality, raids taking place in several towns. The Interior Minister talking of banning the Collective Against Islamophobia, the CCIF, which it accuses of having ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. Yasser Louati, your reaction to that?
Well, we have to first be extremely cautious when we use and throw around words like radicalization. To quote a Senate report by Mr. Jean-Marie Bockel, he says it quite explicitly, quote unquote, we don't have a definition of the word radicalization, and he continues by saying the term has been adopted under the pressure of events. So when we speak of radicalization, we have to make sure that we are not, throwing everybody under the same accusation. Now, as for the raids that have been carried out lately, Gérald Darmanin, on 2 occasions this morning to La Croix, he said that he's not raiding those places because they got something on them, but because they want to send a message. So we have here state-sponsored retaliation and intimidation. And he did the same thing about a week ago when the police raided, a Muslim organization in the city of Bobigny. And Gérald Darmanin the next morning comes on the radio and says, we didn't have anything on them, but we just use the COVID-19 restrictions to shut them down. Now, we may agree or disagree with any other organization. This is a democracy, and we have the right to agree and disagree. But anytime we allow the state to go beyond the due process and say, I'm going to target this organization because at this time, at this moment, it is politically lucrative for my re-election campaign, i.e. the presidentials of 2022, when do we stop? At what point will the state stop targeting individuals? And we saw it, for example, with the state of emergency. Hundreds of raids were carried against Muslim homes, businesses, and mosques, leading to 0.16% of them leading to an investigation on terror grounds. At the end of the day, environmentalists, union leaders, and anarchists were the next targets of this state repression. And we have to, again, to ask the government, where is the scrutiny on the explicit failures of our intelligence community? The culprit was, or the assassin was reported. Now, with all these counter-terrorism laws, with the law allowing mass surveillance, all our communications are under scrutiny, and yet again, we lose our freedoms on the one hand, and we are nowhere safe and against terrorists or any person who takes the matter into their own hands. When are we going to seek public scrutiny on, state authoritarianism in this case, and the fact that we have a prime minister, a minister of interior saying, well, I have nothing legal against them, but I just want to target them to pressure them. We have to be extremely careful. Right. This may be a drift that spells nothing good for democracy.
Fabien Truong, you agree?
Sorry, I've lost the connection, so I couldn't hear what's been said. I'm sorry.
No, we just heard Yasser Louati saying that this was political targeting and that stigmatizes groups on which there's no proof.
Yeah, I mean, if it's about the Mélenchon statement, I mean, it's been said on the set. I mean, there's no point targeting a community because it's all about individual erratic behaviors. So, and that's the difficulty of it. How can you track those kind of behaviors? And here it seems that there's been some traces on the internet about this kind of behavior. So it's more that tracking those individuals' problematic behaviors than a community per se, because this is only going to add fuel to the fire and to that sort of hatred loop that we see on social media. So that's not going to be very effective.
All right, but we're seeing again, and we've been talking about it since the beginning of the show, a climate where it is harder. We talked earlier about the what is the space in which Philippe Cohen, people can have these discussions, can have critical thinking. Middle school pupils can learn how to have an open dialogue and a debate. And what many public school teachers are saying is they're more and more confronted in their classrooms with entrenched positions. Kathy Clifford has more.
In hands of this history and geography teacher, a threatening letter received after she suggested pupils participate in a national competition about the resistance and the Holocaust.
I received an anonymous letter saying I was part of a lobby, accusing me of being worse than a collaborator during World War II.
She believes the threats came from the parents of a pupil. Despite support from upper management, she felt alone as she went through this experience.
The choice of words really affected me. I filed a complaint with the police, of course, but there was no investigation.
It's not just history lessons coming under pressure. French teachers, too, are receiving complaints, sometimes vicious ones.
They said to me about the Greek gods, no, this is false. There is only one God. And from that point, the only thing that counted was what was written in the Bible. Another example, 3 pupils refused to enter a church during a school outing. So this is occurring around all main religions.
These incidents are sparking debate between pupils and teachers, time which is provided for within the curriculum. But sometimes dialogue seems impossible.
For example, a pupil during a dictation exercise preferred to lose points rather than to write the name of God because the pupil was Jewish. Or else kids say to me, you're talking about drifting continents, but no, it was God that made the earth.
These tensions aren't always officially flagged up. Last year, only some 1,000 cases were reported.
What's going on, Philippe Cohen? Are we into this? Are we into a new age of intolerance today?
I think we are losing it, and we need to go beyond the astonishment phase where we are under shock. Now I think it's really time not to wait for the next shock, to be shocked again, and to come back maybe on this set and say we are shocked.
So you're a public school teacher, and you've got some children with very entrenched positions. What do you do when you're the teacher?
So what do we do in practice is that with our partner schools, being public or non-public, we get into contracting with not only with the students, but with also the 4 components of the school climate, which are students, professors, employees of the school, which are also to be taken into account, and the parents. And they all sign the same secular contract, which we call the Respect Zone Charter. It's a 4-paragraph, very short, very universalist and positive. It's everything that we pledge to commit on a positive mode. Like, for instance, I commit not to hurt with my words, and I commit to moderate my space if I am in charge of a digital space, for instance. And the fact that we, upfront, at the kickoff of the back-to-school period, have all these 4 components signing the same document, which has never happened since Jules Ferry organized a public school in France.
In the 19th century.
Which is to have one document signed by the 4 components of the school members. And the parents are part of it. Because the parents are, and this is exactly what happened last week. I mean, the parents are part of the equation, and when everybody pledged for respect at once, and it's very difficult to say I'm against respect, which is why we have never had anyone to say I cannot sign any respect zone charter, and if anyone had an issue with pledging and putting its signature down the 4-paragraph Respect Zone Charter, which is translated into even more languages than the France 24 languages. Then let's have the debate at school. Let's invite the teachers to meet with the parents as opposed to meet with the predicators or third parties from the school, which is exactly what happened. And maybe there should not have been this kind of porosity with the external indoctrination from the outside, which did lead to this crazy assassination.
When you think back, Fabien Truong, to your experience as a teacher, Philippe Cohen's method, would it work?
Yeah, I think it's really important what Philippe Cohen just said, because he points a question of how can we interact together at a time where the classroom is open to the exterior. Because basically this rule of how to dialogue, how to agree to disagree, how to feel safe, to not to know, to change your mind, and so on and so forth. When you're inside the classroom, you can build these rules and this way of interact little by little, day by day, weeks by weeks. But now with the social echo of the social media, and with the fact that people which are outside of the class would give their opinion on what may have happened in the class, we need to set up those new rules. And this is not an easy challenge. And I would say it's not even an easy challenge for the French school, because the French model, the French Republican model, also has built itself with basically making the school as a sanctuary historically. It was the idea that you need to extract the kids from their social milieu to emancipate them. That was the model. But now this model is a problem, because behind all of this, there's how to reestablish the dialogue with the outside. And it's a dialogue which in many cases imposed or superimposed by social media and so on and so forth. But as well, it forces the French school to change its philosophy towards the exterior, and as well to see, let's say, the exterior world not as a problem, but a part of the education world and the interaction. So this is a big challenge, because it really challenged the core of the philosophical building of the French school. And so we're talking about centuries of habits in many ways. So this is a big challenge that we're facing at the time.
You can't keep the outside from coming into the classroom.
We're working with many teachers, and they're bringing the outside in the classroom, and they're bringing the pupils out also. So I think they're changing the way of practicing. They're very smart in that, and I think that's a change, yes, but they're doing it. It's starting anyway. We are bringing classrooms in a trial with terrorism trial. We are bringing them to ceremonies. We are bringing them to different places. We go in the classrooms as victims of terrorism. So I'm not completely, I do not agree completely on this separate words. More and more, they're working on social media. The teachers are using social media in their courses. They're asking the pupils to go on the internet to find keys and to bring it back for debate in the class. So we have the chance that the teachers are smart. They know what they want. They want to educate the persons, and they know they will not educate the person by putting them out of the society. They're trying to bring them back to society. So we have to be positive on that. We have to work all together in the same direction. We have to go on the work that was doing Samuel Paty, because I think he was doing a tremendous work. And we have to support all the teachers that are trying to open the minds of all the children. But also we have to find a way also to educate the parents. Because as you said, we also have the problem with the parents. And in that case, we can see that there's the 30-year-old girl, but the father...
13-year-old girl, yeah.
But the father is also a problem. And the relation between the father and the daughter is to see a bit deeper. But yeah, there's also a problem of the societies.
The society all coming in. And again, it's all amplified by social media. I want to bring up an unrelated case. Judges in France this Monday ordering mediation between Twitter and anti-discrimination groups who had sued the social media giant for, quote, inaction in the face of online hate. You've got a Jewish student union, SOS racism, SOS homophobia, among those pressing the case against Twitter for failing to moderate heinous content. In light of what we've just been talking about, Yasser Louati, where do you start? Do you start with the dialogue with the parents? Because I think waiting for U.S. social media giants to be better regulated, that's going to be a long time, it seems, right?
Well, especially when we know Mark Zuckerberg's positions on tackling hate speech or not in the U.S. context. But we have, and I actually agree with everything that was said before me, but we forget that teachers in France have been crying for help for years, if not decades, that they have lacked the means to properly do their jobs. And now they are expected to not only teach the program, but on top of it, to mediate on issues of public debate. What we lost, unfortunately, with the French public school, at least, is that it's no longer perceived by many people as a safe space. And we cannot have open conversations on matters, and as you mentioned it, entrenched positions when one part or another perceives the schools as a ideological battlefield. Now, if we don't have a safe space, we can teach all we want.
On that point, I went to French school. When I was in 6th and 7th grade, we were taught history of religion, the three big monotheist religions. There was no controversy then.
Yeah, me too. And when I was a kid, I'm a product of public schools. I did not go to private schools my whole education time. But what we have to remember is that there have been multiple witch hunts led against Muslim students wearing the headscarf, then Muslim students wearing the long skirts. Now we have laïcité squads set up by Jean-Marie Blanquer, the exclusion of Muslim mothers wearing the headscarf. And it's difficult to tell kids at the same time, this is a safe space where you can learn to express yourself and develop an argument, etc., but also to accept that what you believe in might not be the truth to others, and that the truth is always subjective to our own experiences and on our own lenses. And the battle we are losing is that public schools, yes, they were perceived as space. I'm a kid of the 90s. It was still safe back then. Today, you have entrenched positions in public debate. We see the hysteria on dominant mainstream outlets, giving fast food debates with no time to develop an argument and explain and teach nuances. But on top of it, you have the echo chamber of the social media, Facebook and Twitter, and all sides of the aisle pretend to have the absolute truth. You have all this toxic mix being poured onto schools, and teachers are supposed to be able to, within an hour or two per week, this is how we're going to deal with it. I think teachers deserve a lot more recognition for the work they're doing. An issue that had not been solved by multiple administrations cannot be solved by teachers who are not given the proper means to do it. And of course, and I agree on that, parents must be part of the equation, because they can do or undo anything being taught in schools. And if they are not on board on these matters of, yes, I have my truth, but maybe somebody else's truth is also a truth, we're not going to go anywhere. And I do respect Mr. Cohen's initiative on creating this space for dialogue, and the fact that Mr. Guillaume showing students what terrorism can do to individuals and society. But if our public schools remain an ideological battlefield, I'm sorry, I'm going to be pessimistic about this.
Philippe Cohen, are we asking too much of teachers?
Yeah, and the big focus of this debate is about school, but I'm sorry to say that what happened last Friday could have happened on the workplace as well. It's not a school only issue. It's a social issue, and I think that we all agree here to say that it's beyond, and the school is only the one of the partial mirror of a larger issue.
But are we asking too much of teachers? Because this was a couple of years back, after the Charlie Hebdo attacks, it was added to the curriculum that there would be more emphasis put in social studies classes on laïcité, on secularism, and talking about these issues.
You know, as Guillaume said, I mean, our job is really to help the teachers and the school education system to, for instance, one of our proposals, and you have mentioned the 50 proposals of these 50 proposals to detox social media, I say, one of them is to say, why don't we have 1 hour per week on education on social media? You know, with a smartphone, for those who have a smartphone, and if they don't have a smartphone, you know, the school system can really have a kind of tablet which can be put at their disposal. But the idea is that it's to put in the design of the education the check of fact, for instance, which is exactly what journalists are supposed to do best. The idea that the critical thought, which has been evoked by Mr. Trong, is paramount to what needs also to be taught at school. And for that, the school system has to get the right ammunitions. Basically, we send the professors in a kind of battlefield, as the SR said, without the right ammunitions. And this is where it's tough, I think. And this is why the idea is to work as a triangle with the NGOs, with the Ministry of Education, with the school system, and to include the parents in the debate. They are not supposed to be left only outside of the classroom. There are not enough debates. And when you tell to a class or to a school system, let's talk about what is respect at school, what is respect about laicity, secularism, religions. The idea is to focus on what gathers people as opposed to what divides. And the dividing approach is exactly what we need to fight all together against. And this is what we all said yesterday in the street.
All right. I want to thank you so much, Philippe Cohen. I want to thank as well Guillaume Denoy de Saint-Marc, Fabien Truong in London, Yasser Louati here in the French capital. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.